Uh, Today I'm going to talk about the influence of biochar materials, especially this field study, 3-year field study on soil carbon, nitrogen transformation in soil and their impact on greenhouse gas emissions. So this talk is a part of our project whose overall objective is to develop a sustainable food and biomass system that is optimized for energy production and also maintenance of ecological services, utilizing a byproduct of biofuel production. Here, that byproduct is biochar. So the specific objective of the talk today is study the influence of the biochars produced from carbon-optimized fast pyrolysis using 3 feedstocks. One is corn stover, switchgrass, and ponderosa pine wood chips on especially the fractionation of soil carbon and nitrogen, and then greenhouse gas emissions from the soils at 2 landscape positions. One is crest, another one is foot slope. Those landscape positions are under corn soybean rotation. So this field study is located in Brookings, South Dakota. So it has, as I said, 2 locations, landscape locations. Upper location is the crest that belongs to the Maddox soil series, and the lower site belongs to the Brookings soil series. The soils of these 2 landscape positions are distinguishable in terms of physical and chemical properties. So in this field study, we actually use the pelleted form of 3 different biochar materials, that is corn stover, switchgrass, and ponderosa pine wood biochars. They were actually hand applied in May 2013, and then we rototilled to the 3 inches depth. So this study has 4 applications. The plot size is 15 by 20 feet. So the last year, that is 2013, we had a corn crop. So that was sown planted in May and harvested in September. The farmer applied fertilizers as per recommendation to his soils to achieve certain target goals. And then this year we have a soybean crop. So this time we didn't apply any fertilizer. This was planted in May, harvested in October. So we have 2 years of data on fractionation of carbon, nitrogen, and greenhouse gas emissions. So for this study, we collected soil samples, actually core samples at 2 depths, 0 to 7.5, 7.5 to 15 centimeters for analysis of different chemical forms of carbon and nitrogen. And then we measure greenhouse gas emissions every week during crop growing season, only the crop growing season. So in this study, the biochars we used were our porous. The pore size distribution ranged from 1 to 22 micrometer. They're highly alkaline, pH above 8, and then a lot of ash content. And also they are aromatic, hydrophobic in nature. They tend to interact with weakly polar to non-polar molecules. So these unique properties of these materials have a potential to influence the physical and chemical process in soil, ultimately the overall pedoclimatic conditions. So these are the selected soil properties of those 2 landscape positions. The upper site, there's the crest position. The soil belongs to the Maddox soil series. Those soils are sandy loam, moderately acidic, lower organic matter, and relatively higher NPK values compared to the foot slope. Whereas the foot slope, the soils in foot slope, they are clay loams, relatively higher organic matter content compared to the upper side. That's why we selected the 2 contrasting sites in terms of both physical and chemical properties. So now I would like to show some the preliminary data, the trends in the preliminary data of the fractionation of carbon and nitrogen, and then greenhouse gases. So this is a total carbon measure at those two landscape positions. The first one is crest, another one, the right side of the graph, that is foot slope. So these were a measure in the 4 treatments. One is a control, other treatments are corn sour, switchgrass, and pine, which were applied on 1% rate. And then this total carbon was measured 3 times at each landscape position. The first time, that is in May, that is immediately after laying out of experimental plots and with application of treatments, especially after application of biochar materials. And the second time, that is September 13, that is after the first cropping season. That's the corn, after harvesting that crop. And the third time we measure, so that's in October 2014, that is second crop growing season, the soybean. So these values were actually the 0 to 7 centimeter soil depth. I'm not showing the second depth, so I'm only showing the data regarding the 0 to 7.5 centimeters. That's where we apply the biochar. So if you look into the crest position, you can see after first cropping season, there's a kind of enhancement in total carbon that is 4 to 37%, whereas in the second year, after second year season, you can see 22 to 43% of increase in total carbon. So we assume this assume this carbon is coming from added cropicity from these crops. And also, there could be some stabilization of whatever the added organic matter through processes like physical and chemical processes with the biochar surface. So the other location is the foot slope. There we observe only after first cropping season, only we observe 20%, additional 23% of added total carbon. But whereas after second season, we observe all 3 treatments, there is some net enhancement of total carbon in the biochar treatments. If you see in the control treatments in the both locations, especially the foot slope, there is a 7.3 to 8.7% decrease in that total carbon, whereas in the crest is almost stable, not much any enhancement or any changes. So that's what we believe. There's some kind of stabilization process of the whatever added organic matter that could be interact with the surface of the biochar materials. So this is a chemical fractionation. So this is a sequential hot water and acid hydrolyzable carbon. So if you look into those, the table, you can see relatively lower soluble and hydrolyzable carbon values compared to the control, especially in the biochar treatments, even though they are not significantly different, but they're kind of lower values. So the recalcitrance indexes were calculated based on non and hydrolyzable and total carbon values. Even you can see the higher values in the biochar treatments compared to the control. And the last column, it has a first order rate constant we calculated for the added organic matter to the soil based on looking at the changes in del C13 values for 2 years for the top, that is 0 to 7.5 centimeters. So we observe a little bit lower rate constants for biochar treatments compared to the control at both locations. So this is a total nitrogen we measure along with the total carbon. So if you look at the crest position, the top position, that is a more eroded. So after first cropping season, we observe 4.7 to 14% additional total nitrogen. And the second season, it's about 3.6 to 9%. The similar enhancement we observe in foot slope too, that is 0 to 6.3 after first cropping season, and then 1 to 4% in the second cropping season. So again, we think this total nitrogen coming from added carbon, crop residues, and also the biological nitrogen fixation for second season that's due to soybean crop. But at the same time, there could be some potential mechanism. If you look at the control treatments, especially at the crest, you can see the net decrease, whereas in the foot slope, also you can see some net decrease. So it seems like whatever added nitrogen from the different, either from the crops or biological nitrogen fixation, somehow it's being protected because of, especially in the biochar treatment plots. So that's why we observe both total nitrogen, total carbon. Over a period of time, there is kind of accumulation in those biochar treatments. So this is a sequential nitrogen, soluble nitrogen, sequential extraction. Initially, we extracted the hot water, and then we use the same materials for acid extraction. So we got soluble and hydrolyzable nitrogen values. Even they follow the similar trends as a total carbon, as I showed in the previous slide, and the same thing, the recalcitrant indices for these forms of nitrogen higher, are relatively higher, even though they are not statistically significant in biochar treatments. So now, after looking at the fractionation of different fractions of carbon, nitrogen, we can see the trends in the greenhouse gases, and then we can relate those trends. So this is accumulative methane emissions at crest and foot slope positions measured in 2 years, 2013, that's the corn crop, 2014, the soybean crop. If you look at the foot slope, that is the left-hand side, so there is some uptake of methane in both years. So that's why you see a negative emissions in all the treatments. So there is no particular effect of biochars. So we assume this could be due to because the foot slope has more clay or organic matter, maybe the structural geometry of the soil that may affect the diffusivity of this methane gas, so that it increases residence time in the soil, so that it allows more time for the microbial functional groups to act on. That's why we see some kind of uptake at the foot slope in both years, irrespective of treatment. Whereas at the crest position, at least we see some positive emissions, but there are some effects of a biochar, especially the switchgrass. It was consistent with the negative emissions. So we think maybe there could be a possibility of increased oxic conditions at the crest because of application of biochars that actually promote the microbial functional groups like methanotrophs which carry out this oxidation, biological oxidation of methane, either low affinity or high affinity processes. Moreover, these biochar, the surface of these biochar materials have high potential to retain the nitrogen substrates in the soil, so that it reduces the competition for enzymes like methane monooxidase, so that they have that enzyme has able to act on methane, carry out more oxidation. So those are the 10 mechanisms we assume based on these trends at 2 landscape positions. So the second gas, this is accumulative carbon dioxide emissions. Those were measured in 2013 and 2014 at both locations, crest and foot slope. But in the first year, we observe there is a kind of enhancement in the emissions at both locations, crest and foot slope. So we observe some kind of the positive substrate induce a positive priming effect because of biochar treatments. And also that hike could be due to the easily available labile carbon substrates. They came along with the biochar material itself, available for microbial functional groups for mineralization or conversion to the carbon dioxide. That's why and also moreover, the biochar materials itself has a lot of inorganic carbon that could be in the form of carbonates that may undergo acid hydrolysis, releasing more carbon dioxide. That's what we assume the first year, the enhancement of emissions in the biochar treatments. Whereas in second year, we observe some decrease in these emissions, especially at foot slope. There is a minus, 5.6 to 18% of decrease in the biochar treatments in the emissions. Whereas in the crest, it was 3.25 to 5.69%. So the second year could be the reductions could be especially the running out of easily available labile carbon substrates, and another mechanism we think about the increase of resource use efficiency of these microbial functional groups in limited carbon conditions. They may utilize water available carbon to make it more microbial, more conservative carbon pool, that is microbial biomass. So that's the one reason. The another could be a potential mechanism could be with the aging, these biochar, the surface of these biochar materials tend to increase the amphilicity of that material may improve over the time. So that could actually promote the physical process like intraparticular occlusion of these available carbon substrates. So there's another sequestering these materials and reduce the spatial contact with the microbial functional groups. So there's another mitigation mechanism we think with the carbon dioxide in second year. And the last gas is the nitrous oxide emissions. That we observe since first year we observe some mitigation with the application of biochar materials in both locations. So this it's already proven the biochar has a liming effect around its vicinity that may influence, that may promote the enzymes like nitrous oxide reductase that may also reduce the emissions. The another thing is we all know the surface of biochar has the ability to retain, especially here, the redox couples like inorganic nitrogen substrates or organic carbon substrates so that they can affect the heterotrophic microbial activity and denitrification process. So that's what we think about the mitigation mechanism with the application of biochar treatments here with the nitrous oxide. The conclusions, so we've seen an impact on the carbon, especially the fractionation of carbon, nitrogen in the both locations, in both years. We've seen an enhancement in these stocks of carbon, nitrogen over the time. And then we observe at the crest position, there's no impact of biochars on methane emissions, but they're all negative, whereas at the crest position there are some positive, but there's some effects, whereas at foot slope there's no effect of biochars and the methane emissions. And then the carbon dioxide emissions, we've seen some hikes in the first year, and the second year some mitigation effects in the biochar treatments, and finally the nitrous oxide emissions, well, we observe some effects, negative impact on the emissions from the first year. So overall, we've seen some aging effects, especially with the biochar treatments. We've seen some improvement in the mitigation effects in terms of carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide. Those mitigation improved with the second year. So that's kind of that kind of behavior related to the trends in the different fractions of carbon, nitrogen. So with that, I'm open to question if any time left.
Maybe time for one question. Anybody has a question? Sure, Caroline.
Did you show any effects on above-ground biomass or crop productivity?
The crop productivity, the last year, this is the corn yields. We didn't see any effects at the foot slope, but we observed there's some hike in the yields in the corn at the crest position. That is 3.5 to 13.5 bushels enhancement in the biochar treatments, even though they are significantly different. This time in the soybean crop, even we observe effects on the crest, not in the foot slope. So we observe even though they are not really high values, but we observe 30 to 100 kilograms of more seed yield at the crest position. So the CSB is the corn stover, WCB is the ponderosa pine wood, Biochar, SGB is switchgrass. So we observe some yields effects only, and that is a more eroded site.